Hey, it's Tim and Lisa, and you're listening to the REI Concierge podcast. The REI Concierge helps Americans living abroad find and buy great investment properties in the U.S. From analyzing markets to finding local partners to closing your first deal, we are partnered with you every step of the way. Let's jump into today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of the REI Concierge podcast with Tim and Lisa. Tim, how's it going today?
It's going well, Lisa. It's just you and me today. And, we're counting down the days until Robinson number 4 comes along. So it's just kind of a holding pattern here in Maryland. Just waiting for that little baby to come out. So in the meantime, we're just going to keep talking about the housing market and, teaching people what we think is going to happen, even though no one really knows.
I am enjoying the thinking about the fact that we are recording this on October 13th, and perhaps by the time it is released to the world, Robinson number 4 might be here.
It could be the birthday.
Maybe I'll be prophetic.
Yeah, it could be. You never know. It's literally any time now. So, hopefully not during the podcast, but maybe after.
Well, if you need to leave, by all means, please.
Luckily, this isn't actually live, so we can stop and record this later. But yeah, I'll let you know if I got to go real quick.
Yeah. So, as Tim mentioned, it's just us talking today, and we thought we would bring you some unofficial notes on the housing market. And I want to emphasize these are unofficial notes. We are not economists. We are not financial advisors. We are not attorneys. We are not prophets.
We are definitely not prophets. We just read about real estate and have our own thoughts, and wanted to talk to you, dear listeners, about some of our thoughts. And, let's hash it out a little bit. But yeah, don't fact check us because, we get our facts from other people. So fact check them. That's what I'm trying to say.
Speaking of other people, I recently listened to a podcast by David Stein of Money for the Rest of Us and said, Tim, you got to listen to this. And I think we should talk about this on our podcast. And I really like David Stein. He is a financial advisor, and he was just talking about the housing market and looking at it and kind of asking the question, should we expect a crash coming up? And he's looking at it from some really interesting angles. And I mean, should I do a spoiler alert here that things are not pointing to a huge market correction or crash, like we like to talk. We like what are the kind of words like crash and horrific and
so many exclamation points. Yeah. All the exclamation points, all the hyperbole. I think everything is going to be just fine in the grand scheme of things. And again, no crystal ball, no prophecy here. But I mean, we all know how media kind of hypes things up, and there's a small indication that housing prices are ticking up, and the mortgage forbearance is over, and everything's coming crashing down because it happened once in 2008. So I think a lot of people are expecting it to be kind of the same thing as it was in 2008 when the bottom just fell out of the market, and people were losing their homes left and right, and it was a terrible time, and real estate investors kind of came in and swooped them up for pennies on the dollar. None of the signs are pointing to anything like that going to happen. It's just a different framework than it was in 2008. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of people, like you said, Lisa, they have equity in their home. So even when this mortgage forbearance, comes to an end, it's not like, everyone's just going to get evicted. People have equity in their homes because during this mortgage forbearance across the country, home prices have skyrocketed. So even if they didn't necessarily have equity before the mortgage forbearance program went into place, they almost certainly do now. So it's not going to be a matter of, oh my God, I'm losing my house. I have to, downsize, downgrade. And I don't know what I'm going to do. They can most likely sell their house for more than they paid for it and find a different solution. So I think it's interesting to see how all these pieces play together. And it's a very weird time for all the reasons. But at the same time, when you see headlines like, is a market crash coming? Is this a bubble? Blah, 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 blah. Like, I think the short answer is no. It's just a matter of I guess, examining the fundamentals and, what all the indices are pointing towards, and kind of seeing, I mean, again, we're not going to prognosticate, but basically we just see things being just fine, I guess. I don't know how to say it more plainly than that. There's going to be some things that happen, but I don't think it's going to be any kind of crash or bubble or anything like that.
Well, and I think it's worth unpacking, since you like that term so much.
Ugh, the unpacking.
I'm going to say that more and more just to aggravate,
I know you are.
You're welcome. The mortgage forbearance program that is coming to an end, I want to acknowledge for myself that back in 2008, 2009, I was incredibly fortunate to not actually be paying that much attention to what was going on. And that could talk to my fortunate situation in life where I had a job and a house and nothing was disrupted. And also just my ignorance, perhaps, and blinders on and just living my life and not paying attention to all these things. And one of the comparisons that I found really interesting now is, I mean, the numbers are, back a year ago, I think there was about 7.2 million people that were participating in the loan forbearance program who were not able to keep up with their mortgages. Now it's down to 1.7 million. And the majority of those people, they're not underwater. So their house is worth more than they owe. And that was just not the case. So back in 2008 or so, if you had bought your house for 600,000 and your mortgage was 425, all of a sudden your house was worth 350. And that's what forced people into foreclosure, because selling, they would have still owed, $125,000 to the bank. And so it just wasn't possible. Selling wasn't an option then. So foreclosure was really the only option. And it's different now. So if I couldn't pay my mortgage after this forbearance program ends, I could just sell my house, pay off the mortgage, probably still have a little extra cash in pocket, and go on with my life. And that's one of the really significant differences for people who are kind of anticipating lots of foreclosures coming up. There still may be some. And if people have to start selling their house, it will increase the supply of houses on the market. So I think those are interesting comparisons.
Yeah, totally. No, those are all great points. And I think I read somewhere that the number of people, like you said, in mortgage forbearance program, you said it's 1.5 million or something like that now, down from a high of over 7 when it was at the height of the pandemic. And I read a prediction that Zillow is not just that little website where you go in and type things and do your little SNL browsing late at night and dream of the house to become. Zillow's a monster. They buy up houses, and they're a big player in the real estate market, and they are predicting that only 25% of those folks that are currently in the mortgage forbearance program are going to probably lose their houses because of inability to pay. So I can't do the math, but what is that, like 300,000 people, which is terrible and unfortunate and hopefully doesn't come to fruition. But if that is the case, it's not going to be, 10 million people. We're talking maybe 300,000 people will be forced to sell. And even like you said, that's just obviously just a prediction. And worst comes to worst, they hopefully won't be too terribly underwater if they are foreclosed. Like, they'll be able to get some equity out of there and start fresh somewhere else. But and obviously anyone losing their house is a tragedy. But when we're talking on the grand scheme of things, like 300,000 people out of 380 million Americans is not, it's unfortunate, but it's not crazy. It's by no means a crash or a bubble or anything like that, is what I'm trying to get at. And on the other side of that, we're still in a massive housing shortage in this country. I think Fannie and Freddie predicted that we are 4 million housing units short going into 2022.
3.8
and builders
million.
have just started. It's nuts how many houses we need for the number of people that we have. And I think building is just starting to ramp back up because of, lumber prices have been skyrocketing and just no supply of basic building materials. I mean, that's starting to help with some, sawmills being built here in the US, and the reproduction of lumber and stuff like that is starting to ramp back up. So it's becoming a little bit more affordable to build, but like, you can't just build all these houses overnight. So there's still a massive housing shortage as well. So there's so many different levers that are being pulled on from so many different directions in the economy that are just totally different than they were in 2008. And I didn't really want this podcast to be a comparison of now in 2008, but maybe that's actually a good way to go, because I think there's so much fear associated with 2008 that we kind of want to dispel that and just say, don't worry. I mean, it's a crazy time in the world for everybody, but this is not 2008. And I think there's so many different things in play that just didn't exist in 2008.
Listen to the full podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, or any of your favorite podcast apps.